Hello and welcome to the Happy Insights podcast. I am your host, Happy Ali. I want to welcome you to today's show. I have an incredible guest on the show today. Her name is Rebecca Wildbear. She is the author of Wild Yoga, a practice of initiation, veneration, and advocacy for Earth. I am excited to have her on the show, and she's going to be on a couple of episodes. So I'm excited to introduce her to you and have her share some of her wisdom. She's also a creator of a yoga practice called Wild Yoga, which empowers individuals to tune into the mysteries that live within the earth community, dreams, and their own wild nature. Thank you so much for being on the show, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you.
I was hoping you could shed some light on some of my favorite topics. You know, my audience knows and my listeners know that I love tapping into inner wisdom. That's why my show is called Happy Insights, because it's all about coming from within. Because I feel ultimately the best kind of information that we get is from inside of us. And it doesn't really come from a book, although you do have a wonderful book that has lots of wonderful information. But I believe that came from inside of you. And it wasn't something you just went to researched. Was your book researched, or did it just come from within you as just pour out of you?
I would say mostly it just came from within, but there was some research.
Yeah, you can tell when you read a book that's just inspired, or when you read a book that just, someone was just reading like 50 books and chopped it up into one solid book. And that's why I felt like I was like, I bet you most of this stuff is just pouring through her. So I wanted to ask you a question. In your book, you talked about the muse. Can you tell me about that? Because I really wanted clarification on that. Who is the muse?
The muse is it's a bit mysterious. It's the muse is to me like a beloved, an inner, it's kind of connected to the inner beloved, and it also seems connected to our creativity, like what wants to come through us. That's just ours. That's just our way of seeing the world or our particular voice. Sometimes it can be challenging. I think we all have access to it, but sometimes it can be challenging because sometimes the muse sees things that others can't see, or wants to say things that are a bit unusual. So we can have all these other parts of our personality that, don't want to maybe keep a lid on it, or, don't want to say it, and sometimes it can be hard to see things that other people don't see, and not be able to talk about them when they seem like the most important thing. But the muse is this part of us that, to me, just or it's hard to say if it's part of us, part of out there in the world, kind of maybe a little bit of both. But it has a particular genius, and like something's missing, a certain song or note from the world. And when we tap into the muse and allow the muse to speak through us, or guide us, I call it living a muse-directed life. How can you live a muse-directed life? Which means not only how can my muse help me write my book or help me guide, but how can the muse help me make decisions? The muse is really the wellspring of our creativity, of and our particular genius and way of seeing the world. That's very connected to kind of like you could say an inner beloved. It's also connected to our visionary agent. Like we all have the capacity to vision in the world for, what is most worth doing and being, and how should I move about in today and next week and next year, and the muse is the one that can help guide us. The muse doesn't always answer every question. I ask the muse a lot of things, and the muse just has no comment, no response. So it's not like, to me, it's not like I always get a direct answer about everything. I do ask. To live a muse-directed life, I often ask, how about this, or how about that? Sometimes I get an answer, sometimes I don't. But then the muse also has certain things that's just like this. And that definitely was the case with my book. It was like, put everything else aside. Like, we have something to say, sit down at the computer, write. And sometimes that's the way the muse is. It just tells you, like, I'm not going to answer all these other questions, but one thing I will say is do this now.
I had to bring this up because I'm in the process of finishing my book that's about tapping into your inner knowing. And I have a list in one of the chapters about what kind of energy and what kind of intelligence you can tap into when you go in within. And I feel like I covered everything that I thought, but I never had something called the Muse because I just didn't have a label for it and I'd never heard about it. I heard about people being other people's muse, but I'd never heard about that concept. And it was really cool because, I feel like your interpretation of the muse is basically where I get a lot of my information from because I never know it's where it's coming from, but it's very loud when you allow yourself to listen to it. And I love when I'm going to use your terminology. I always do that with my guests because I love playing with other people's terminology. It's like when the muse for me, when I tap in and ask a question about my most creative projects or just endeavors or anything, sometimes it does say, nope, we're not writing that at all, or we're not doing that. It's just not happening. And then all of a sudden, another door opens or something lights up in my brain that says, this is what we're doing today. So if you want to do that, things are going to be easy. You're going to be going with a flow. Everything's just going to be just presented to you at the right time. But if you want to go against what I'm saying, it's going to be a tough ride. Do you ever find that something similar to
Oh,
that?
oh yeah, definitely. If you're not, it's like when when I'm following the muse, I'm in a creative flow. So it's happening. And when I'm not with the muse, it can be a little bit like trying to travel upstream, like somehow the current is not, I'm going against the flow somehow. And, it happens like that some moments, but that's a way of being in sync with the muse or not. It also is interesting. It's a bit like a love affair, I find too. And when I'm with the muse, like I'm happy, whereas I'd say happiness has often been like for me being out in nature, being swimming in the water or the river, which is great. And I still love doing all those things. And so I wouldn't find happiness sitting at a computer typing on keys, like for hours and hours, like could be 10 hours a day or something if there's a lot coming through or in the middle of the night. But when I'm with my muse, I am happy doing those things because I am like swimming too. I'm swimming in the current of like what my muse is downloading. It's another kind of like joy and passion that's very from the imaginal rather than the physical.
I love that because you did just touch upon something really mundane and boring, which is sitting in front of your computer, and you intertwined it with something so beautiful, such as the muse and that creative intelligence that we all have access to. So I wanted to bring that up first because I feel like I live a very muse directed life, and your whole book is amazing. By the way, for people who want to know, it's called Wild Yoga. It is a practice of initiation and veneration and advocacy for the earth. It is out on February 14th on Valentine's Day. But I wanted to know if you're willing to share some techniques and how people can tap into their inner muse, because some people might say, how do I know where the inner muse is, or how can I access the inner muse? And I know I'm jumping so far ahead in your book because you've taught a lot of this stuff, but this is our conversation.
Yeah, great. Thanks for doing that. And I love how you started with the muse in a way because it's helped, when we have something to aspire to, it helps us get down to taking the steps to get there. So people might say, I'd love to live a muse directed life, but I feel really far from who is even the muse. Have I even felt contact with the muse before? And I think the muse, courting the muse, is in my book. It's chapter 14 of 18 chapters. And in a way, all the chapters before are leading up to exactly the question you're asking, like, well, how do I get there? How do I become a person who can listen to their muse and follow the muse? Because my book actually, it's sort of, you might have noticed, it has like it's a steep journey. Like the beginning chapters really reach out to the basic person to connect with your body. Like the first chapter is really about the intelligence of the body. In a way, the body is a kind of muse who we can listen to. Like, what's the wisdom of the body, and how can I hear what it's saying, or having its like symptoms or impressions or things coming from there to guide me, following its urges. That's something we often don't do with the body. We're taught to sit in a desk and sit in a car. And so how can I reawaken the body. I often invite people back to when they were 5 years old in programs I'm guiding, and go rescue the person that was sitting in the desk all day that you're not supposed to do as a kid, and go out and take them out and let them guide you. So that coming back to the body. Then chapter 2 is about nature, which is another muse. It's another higher intelligence than just us, our human minds. How do I have a relationship with nature where I can listen to it? Most of the time that humans have been alive on the planet, they have talked and listened and been guided by nature. It's only in the last couple hundred years or so that humans have become more and more separated from that intelligence. And so how do we get back to it? In this modern time, what are the steps we can take? And I go step by step through different ways that you can do that. And the third chapter is about the heart, which is a lot of times just to survive the traumas and the heartbreaks and the dominant civilization. It's like we cut off from our hearts. But if we cut off from our hearts, we're not alive. And how can we tap into the muse or any kind of intelligence if we're not even connected to our own wild heart? So chapter 3 is a lot about getting back in contact with our wild hearts. And 4 is our ferocity, which is oftentimes downplayed, right? We're not supposed to be fierce, especially women or people, lower on the scale of the cultural hierarchy, whose voice, who should be obedient and not out of line and not challenge the system, which is most people. But we're not allowed to be fierce. And it gets confusing because there is kinds of violence that are very harmful to the planet and to other people. But there's also ferocity that's very protective energy that protects ourselves, that protects nature. And so that is a natural response that's actually healthy. So I'm kind of calling that back.
It's not about like being violent. There's a difference between violence. Violence is just this greedy little thing that's all comes from insecurities. This is really about expressing, I that's what my interpretation was, like just expressing your inside and as loud as you can in a way. And that's, I come from the gay culture. Being fierce, I love that you were is kind of part of our mantra, that you just have to, because we are suppressed as a culture. We were for so long, and now people are just coming out and just bursting out at the seams and just expressing who they are and very unapologetic about it. It's coming out. So I've kind of felt like, but I never like equated to anything negative. I just think it's just an expression, of because in the wild, when the animals are about to attack, it doesn't have malice when you think about it. It's nature. It's one with the earth, and it's just one with the process of everything. So I want to express that, like, the animal does not go and kill everyone and decide that this is all my territory and I'm going to kill every single person and you're all going to be obedient, and it goes and takes what it needs for the moment and then moves on.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Totally. And it's been fascinating when I've worked with individuals that there is a lot of protection around allowing ourselves to be fierce. There can be guilt or things that come into that. And a lot of times dream animals or dream beings are coming back to help us re-inhabit a natural, healthy ferocity, just like what you're talking about.
I love that. I just love that. It's just like giving yourself permission to be who you are, because you were designed in a very perfect way. We just, we just get a little bit greedy sometimes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All right. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
I'll just add to the other two pieces, like chapter 5 has received the love of trees, because love is the ultimate. I think of love like oxygen. We all need it, and sometimes it seems like there can be not enough in ourselves or in the world. And trees, to me, are the most loving beings, one of the most loving beings on the planet. And forests, if we look at the way that they give to each other and they give to everything else. So I've spent long times apprenticing to trees to help develop my own capacity to love and to really learn what love is. So I really bring that in chapter 5, because if we're going to be resourced in any kind of life going forward, it has to be a foundation of love. And then chapter 6 is about the dream world, which talk about another muse or form of intelligence. Dreams have been and I know you mentioned that earlier when we talked for you, but dreams have been, central to me in guiding my life, listening to what they have to say. So I focus on that. And so that's all just the first section of the book, part one, which is about wild. It's coming back into our wild nature. And then there's so much more in the next part, which is the soul and the spirit journey. I call it holy longing, going descending down into our particular purpose and mythos, which is a lot of the work that I've done with Animas Valley Institute as a guide, is the journey of soul initiation. And then I also talk about the spirit journey, which is one of union and transcendence and connecting. And I consider myself kind of a nature mystic. I think of there being a lot of higher powers. And I often find that nature is, for me, where I feel, sort of a divine union that, that I'm in love with. And it's the whole chapter in there is about love, the inner beloved and falling in love, and grief and heartbreak too, especially planetary grief, and the dark night of the soul, and also, finding our way into the symphony of like playing our note while also being attuned and in relationship with the rest of the world, even when there's dissonance like there is in our world now. And then the last section, which you jumped into with the muse, but is about beloved world, which is how do we bring back everything from our journey and all we've gathered and all we've learned in our resources to develop that relationship with the muse and our own wild eros, and pray for the planet and dream radically, and how do we make an offering from resourced with all the help of all these relationships and guides.
You give yoga poses in the book to allow you to tap into different energies and be able to tap into some of the ideas that you have, or become one with the earth, basically, a lot of them. And I found that really, really interesting. Can you explain how yoga and all of the things that you mentioned are related, and especially wild yoga? What is wild yoga? Maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, wild yoga, I find, is a practice of loving ourselves, loving our bodies, connecting with the earth and our earth's bodies. The original yogis said that yoga was asana, and it's also a journey of who we are and who is the world and how do we be in relationship. And a lot of the poses originally were animal poses and named after animals, as a way almost of coming back into our wild animal nature so that we could relate with the wild world. And you could say in wild yoga, I just take that and I go all the way with it, in that the poses are meant to inhabit our true wildness. And they're also meant for us to feel ourselves as a cell in the body of earth, that we're in relationship, that we're not separate. I mean, a big premise of my book is that our health and well-being can't ever be tended without, care of the planet too, that because we are in union. So the first beginning part of that, though, is just coming home into our bodies and just feeling our connection to earth. It's very simple, but it's not always easy. And the yoga poses really help us do that. So whatever, I end with every chapter with a yoga pose so that we can feel an embodied sense of the teaching and the lesson in a way that we can embrace it physically in our body. And it just seems like, there can be a lot of lessons or a lot of teachings and a lot of things, maybe that are great ideas, but how do we live them? And you could say my practice is embodied with practices so that we can actually practice and play. Not, practice is not perfection. It doesn't mean everything's going to come easy right away, but if we play and we practice, then more comes and things shift.
So I really like that you did that, because it really anchors the ideas in, and I feel like you end up learning so much more when you do the yoga poses. So if anyone's buying this book, make sure to do the poses and don't go past it and look at the pose as just something that she just decided to put in there. Because I think as a hypnotherapist and someone who works with the subconscious mind and someone who really knows about learning and just absorbing information, when you do stuff like that, when you do the exercises, it infuses your mind, and the memory becomes so much more vivid. And then when you have a physical experience mixed with something you just learned, it's anchored for life, basically. Did you already know which position would be for which kind of thinking, or did it just come to you naturally, or
well, I've been a yoga teacher for a while, I think since I was in my early 30s, so almost 20 years. And I've been doing wild yoga programs since 2007. And so I have a particular way of guiding yoga classes as it is. when I guide people through the poses, I usually have stories and imaginal invitations with them. I actually on my website, RebeccaWildbear.com, I have a yoga class, a 20-minute yoga class. So if you wanted to just be guided in a yoga class, you can do that, and get a sense of it. And so the poses in some way did just show up naturally because I've been doing yoga for so long that like I would just be writing a chapter and or even contemplating writing a chapter and already like the pose would appear that seemed to make sense with that chapter.
Yeah, I had a lot of aha moments. Every time I'd look at the pose, I'd be like, oh wow. It was so perfect. Definitely, it was amazing. I love this book. You guys have to go check it out. So I'm going to wrap up this episode because our time is up. But in the next episode with Rebecca, we're gonna talk about nature, really conversing and communing with nature, because I felt that that's really your superpower, in my opinion, after reading that book. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you. It's been really great.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please make sure to write a review and have a good day. Bye bye.